Hello and welcome to the M.B.Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the M.B.Om podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Fave Yogis. You guys have been hearing about Fave Yogis for a couple of months now, and it's because it's a super awesome business tool that's really going to change the lives of you, yoga teachers. So this app was really designed with yoga teachers in mind. The Fave Yogis app puts control and freedom in your hands. You can update your class schedule, offer your own classes anywhere, anytime, and get paid all from your phone. There's no more updating your schedule in multiple places for students to maybe stumble across it. Students simply open Fave Yogis and your schedule will be there. With Fave Yogis, you can receive donations or tips from students, send students notifications about class updates, set prices and ticket availability, and auto-send reminders to students. It's just your yoga, teachers add classes, students add teachers, students and teachers stay connected. Get the Fave Yogis app for free in your app store today. FAVYOGIS. And when you sign up for Fave Yogis, make sure you use code M.B.O.M, M.B.O.M, and let them know that I sent you. Now, before we dive into today's episode of the podcast, I also wanted to remind you that Yoga Business Bootcamp is live. This is something I've been working on for months and months and months, and I'm so excited that it's live for you. So if you are looking to take your business to the next level, if you are looking to take your business from ground zero and build it up, this program is definitely for you. It is 12 modules. It takes you from dream job creation all the way through to developing sales funnels for your business. You can buy the modules separately if you just need help with one aspect of your business or everything together. And if you're not sure if this is right for you, there is a podcast that you can go get. It's Yoga Business Bootcamp by M.B.Om. I've also got videos up on the YouTube channel. If you just search Amanda Kingsmith or M.B.Om, you'll be able to find that. And of course, if you want to get the course, you can find it at yogabusinessbootcamp.teachable.com, or you can go to mbomyoga.com/yoga business bootcamp. All right, on to today's episode of the podcast. I'm so excited to be joined by Colynn Vosburgh, who is from Friction Yoga. She is a yoga teacher and yoga business coach, and we dive into so many different topics here, but really talking a lot about the power of investing in yourself, the power of having a business coach, how coaching has really changed her life, and how it could change yours too. So without further ado, here is Colynn. I'm very excited to be joined on the podcast today by Colynn Vosburgh, who is joining me from British Columbia, Canada. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you here because we've got a really interesting topic that we're going to cover. But I want to back up and talk about your yoga story. Like, how did you first get into yoga and what inspired you to become a teacher?
Okay. So in 2000, I had a baby and I also started like a nursing career, and it was super stressful and I had to go to work right away. So I found yoga. So that was like 18 years ago now. And I practiced yoga quite faithfully up until about 5 years ago when I took my yoga teacher training. So I had been a nurse in ER the whole time and an avid practicer. And then I had decided that I wanted to go another step in my career. So I applied to and got into med school. And at the same time, the yoga teacher training came up, and I thought it would be a good balance to kind of help with the stress, to take two trainings at the same time. But it was really good. So I remember there was like a time when my teacher was like, your life before yoga teacher training and then your life after yoga teacher training. And I kind of laughed and thought, oh yeah, so dramatic, but it literally was that.
Yeah. What was it like doing yoga teacher training while doing med school? I mean, that just seems crazy.
It was, what was crazy was that I knew the minute that I started taking my teacher training, I had made a mistake signing up for med school.
Did you continue with med school then?
I did. I continued for 2 years, just because I had convinced my family to stand behind me in nursing, yoga, and school. And I had literally taken out a mortgage on my education and felt if I quit, then, it was for nothing. So I should probably finish and then, make the finances of a doctor so I could pay off all this debt that I had just had.
And so did you finish med school and become a doctor, or like what kind of shifted there?
So it was, I remember it was, I think a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I was doing all these things. I was teaching yoga so much, and I was back to half-time nursing, and then I was in full-time med school, and I was exhausted and unhappy, and I kind of reached out to the universe to send me a sign, and I got in touch with the coach. And I remember thinking, coaches are kind of for crazy people, but I'll take advantage of this one free session that I get with this woman, and it'll be great. But I took the session, and it was amazing. And I said yes, which was crazy in itself. But then after, I ended up leaving all of it, nursing, med school, everything.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. And I really want to dive into that bit about the coaching. But I want to back up a little bit into your story and talk about what inspired you to make that transition from being a practitioner to actually teaching. It's so funny because I had practiced for a very long time in a place called Bella Coola. So it's the end of the road. It hits the ocean. It's West Coast, and it's small. And there was no yoga down there. So I would watch videos. So Guy M and Rodney Yee was my guy. And when I moved to the city, I then started trying out all these other studios, and fell in love with this one parallel. And it was there. They didn't have mirrors. They were so like non-judgmental. They enveloped yoga. And I kept going there, and then they offered a teacher training, and I thought, I'll just take it to advance my practice. And I told the owner of the studio and my favorite instructor that, I'm not doing this to be a teacher. I want to be a better student. That's so interesting. Yeah, there was a bunch of people in my teacher training who kind of had that mindset as well. And then I think, like, to be honest, when I went in, I thought I wanted to teach, but I was like, not really 100% sure. I feel like teacher training is kind of this weird sort of journey that you go on that's very personal, and you just never really know what you're going to come out with on the other side. So did you know, like, after you finished teacher training, was that when the shift happened for you where you're like, oh, I think I actually do want to teach this?
I think it was my practicum, or maybe my group practicum, one of them. And it went so well. And, all the teachers that participated in the practicum were totally zenned out. And my instructor, who was also a co-lead facilitator in the training, said, you totally have to do this, right? And I was like, yeah, I know. So it was near the end of the teacher training that I recognized that it was just something that was a total natural thing for me. And I wanted to spread what I got out of yoga to everybody else.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really cool moment probably to have had in your life, to be like, having this practice class and being like, wow, this is really amazing. This is something that I want to do. Yeah, I think it's, and I don't know, like, obviously your whole life path, but I feel like there's so many moments, there's so few moments like that in life. Like, I remember when I was going through university and I was studying business, I was just like, like, I'm taking these accounting classes. Like, I really don't want to be an accountant. Like, I don't really want to, be in operations. Like, what am I doing here? And had all these moments where I was just super confused with my life. And then, teaching yoga was one of those things for me too, where I was like, well, this feels like something that I could do forever.
Yeah, there's not very many of them, and that's why I think you remember them, because they're defining.
Yeah, definitely. And so at this point, you've graduated teacher training. You have decided that you do want to teach, but you're also like med school graduate and all this other stuff. Is that where the coach comes in, or what does that look like?
So I finished my teacher training in August, and then I started my own little gym on a property that I lived on, and we did a rock climbing yoga studio. So it was in a barn. It was decently big, but not huge, and it was like a family project, and so that's where the name Friction came from. And then we left due to lots of family conflict, and we moved from Abbotsford to Chilliwack. And so now we're looking at like April, and I'm in a new city, and I'm seeing lots of studios around me, and there was a lot of stress. And so, when you kind of let go of the things that you need, I had let go of yoga because it was a source of conflict for a little while. So I reached out to the local studios that were all kind of just starting when I moved there to counteract some of the stress. And I started teaching all around there. And I noticed that I loved teaching, and I was no longer loving working in the emergency room. And I was definitely not loving med school. And that is when I kind of said to the universe, please, like, if you're really there to help me out, hook me up. And bing, I had an email, and it was this free coaching session.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I took it, and she was very impactful. So I'm not much of a crier, and I definitely have an interesting history in my life. And she didn't make me cry, but we went deep, and it was not as uncomfortable or as awkward as I thought that it would be to go deep. And so she said, do you want to have another session? And I'm like, yeah, okay. How much? And she's like, we'll talk about it next time. So we had another session, and that session was actually a sales conversation in which the things that she said were like a lot of like, if you keep doing the same things you've been doing, you're going to get more of what you've got. And it made so much sense. And then she said, like, here's my prices. And I was like, I thought it was kind of cute that she thought maybe I had that much money, because her fee was my yearly income from nursing. Mm-hmm. And I did happen to have just done my taxes and gotten a refund because I was in school. And I don't know, she made sense. It scared the poop out of me, but I said yes, and I gave her I paid her a down payment.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And
everything changed.
Was that just this year, or when was this that this happened?
That was in August of not this year, but last.
Okay. So August 2017.
2016.
Okay. Yeah. It was like, I should clarify since we've just switched years over here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Wow. What a big transition to have. And so you started working with a coach. You quit med school. Is that right? Or did you finish med school?
Yeah, no, I quit med school immediately. And then I had decided that, I was loving yoga so much. Before I met her, I thought it would be great to not nurse and to teach yoga, but I thought that was just a dream. And when I started working with her, I immediately knew that, if I kept thinking it was a dream, then it would only be that, but it could actually be a reality. So I actually in September, I set a quit date of nursing for January of 2017.
That's amazing. So you've been off nursing for a year now.
Yes.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so I want to dig into this idea of investing in yourself and hiring a coach, because, I've done the same thing, and I kind of thought, the same thing as you in the beginning, like, maybe coaching is for people who just need help, and I'm not somebody who needs help, and that sort of thing. And then it took until my boyfriend was actually in a program that offered complimentary coaching, which is a company that we now both work for. And I saw what value he was having in having these weekly sessions with somebody just to be able to talk things through. And I was like, I feel like I could use that. And I think that I probably would have come around to it on my own had that not happened. But I think that there's a lot of people out there who kind of have this similar, thought process as I did and you did when we first kind of started out. What do you feel like shifted for you? Like, what do you feel like was kind of inspired you to actually say yes to this call?
Those words that if I keep doing what I've been doing, I'm going to get more of what I've got. Definitely hit a note. I had to do something drastically different. Mm-hmm. And I've been a huge believer of karma and all that stuff. So there was like a piece of me that she said that as a coach, she'll help me find clarity and I'll be able to pay her bill monthly. And so I thought, well, whatever, if I give her this money, if I pay her this money and it doesn't work out, it's kind of her karma, or I'll literally be able to do this. And then I did. In fact, I had given her a proposed pay in full date, and it was October the 28th, and I paid her in full by October the 25th.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like? Do you feel like is actually the conversations with somebody, or, having somebody hold you accountable, or the investment that you made in yourself? Like, what do you feel like it is about coaching that actually kind of lights that fire underneath you?
This is great because, part of coaching is looking back at all the things and what it is that you're doing that works and what you're not doing and all of those things. So looking back, it's a whole mix of things. Number one, investment. So the investment holds you really accountable, right? It's not like I'm going to pay this woman that much money and then not show up for our calls. But the questions also really help you to find clarity. So when I first talked to her, a question was, what do you want? And I want happiness. So that's a really broad term. I want happiness. That's really great. Mm-hmm. But what is happiness? And then I was like, I don't know. And then, okay, that looks like success. That is a financial number at the time of $20,000 a month. Like happiness to me looks like some recognition in the yoga world. I was very clear about what happiness was. And then when you start off so broad, happiness, well, what's that? Success. Well, what's success? And then the clearer you are, the more laser-like, focus you can have that really starts to not only set an intention, but actually give you action steps towards what it is that you're focusing on.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Cause I feel like too, like mine would probably be happiness. But it's like when you start diving deep, like the way that happiness is for you in your life is probably different for the way that happiness is for me in my life, which means like we can't do the exact same things to get happiness out of our lives. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I talk about with success as well, is I feel like in all industries, people look at like, oh, I want to be successful with my career. But it's like, what does that mean to you? Like how do you define success? Like, when will you know if you're successful? Because, if I'm successful and you define that by what I define it as, then that's not how you're defining it. It becomes kind of this big mess where you're unclear of what you actually want.
Yeah, totally. And when you like put it into the context of like the universe, so this goes into some faith, and some people, when I started all this work, I was super uncomfortable with the word God or religion or anything. Even spiritualism was kind of an uncomfortable word for me, even though I was in the yoga world. But I started to recognize that I use words all the time, like everything happens for a reason and fate. But if you are like putting out there that you want to be happy, then if you look, there are moments in your life when you're happy. If you're laughing, you're happy. So then the universe has hit its mark. It's great. There you go. There's some happiness. But when you're specific, that happiness to me is being known around Chilliwack by a majority of people as like a household name. It's defined by $20,000 a month. It's defined by, and then you go deeper into relationships that I have with my family, having some good friends, like all those kind of things. Then you find that there's not just moments of happiness overall. You're happy. And that's a little bit less broad than just plain happiness.
Right. Because then you can actually set some tangible goals based on those things. Because it's not just like, oh, I want to be happy in my life. It's like, okay, happiness means making this much money per month and having this type of quality relationship with my partner and my children and that sort of thing. And then you can actually work towards getting those things.
And you can set this goal and then not make it. And the lessons that you learn within that is that you can be happy even if you're not hitting a financial goal. And you can be happy if you had a definition of friendship and then you pretty much, when you start to set up boundaries, lots of people fall away from your life. And so happiness, maybe when you started, looked like having tons of friends, but actually the deeper that you get into learning what happiness truly is for you, you recognize that means having one really good friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
definitely.
So there's also lessons in that as you go deeper into finding out what your actual definition is, because sometimes we're just like happiness and then that's it. It's some broad term and you can use that for the rest of your life to actually just never be successful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's a really important thing to add on there, because I think that sometimes people set these things for themselves and they're like, okay, well, I equate happiness to this much money per month and I'm not there yet, i.e. I'm not happy. But you can definitely be happy within the realms of making less money or not having the relationships you want, or adjusting those things as you go, realizing what is actually important to you or shifting that and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's really common in the yoga industry, or that I hear a lot, is that, people aren't making enough money and then, they don't have enough money to spend on things like something like coaching. And, obviously you invested and are continuing to invest a ton of money into your coaching experience. What do you feel like is like, or what would you tell someone who's like, yeah, it sounds good, I think that I should do it, but I don't have enough money to do it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I did not have enough money when I said yes to my coach. The thing is that what I've learned is that when you're very passive, like, okay, I'll hire a coach when I get the money, there's no urgency in creating the money. But when you actually hire the coach and you put down a significant, amount of money, a down payment on that, then that creates an urgency for you to follow through and actually make it happen. So if you think about anything that you've ever wanted to do in your life, like you're doing it and nothing's going to stop you. Let's say I see your picture as you in Peru. So let's just say that you have this lifelong dream of going to Peru and that's all you dream about. You're going to do it. Nothing's going to stop you. And then, all of a sudden the perfect Peru retreat pops up and you're like, okay, I'm going. There's no question. You create an urgency, and then somehow, in those times when you've made money or paid for something, you look back and you're like, really, I don't know how I did that, but I did. That's kind of what you create. So one of the questions I always ask people is like, how serious are you? And I don't know how you experience this, but pretty much 10 out of 10 people say, I'm so serious. And then when they're hit up against blocks of like actually finding money, then the reality is they're really not that serious, because the minute they bumped into something, the fight was kind of lost. Mm-hmm. Because maybe the reality is that, happiness is so undefined that there's no urgency to make it all happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that it's easy to be like, oh, I make this much money a year and therefore I need to spend within my means, and not thinking about the potential of like how much more money you could make if you really needed it. Like, I think that people do think about it in the terms of, say you're a mother and your child needs something healthcare related, which would be much more relevant to American listeners than, us as Canadians. but it's like you would hustle to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would pick up a serving job or, you know, whatever you needed to do to make sure that your kid got what they needed. But I think that we're a lot more passive when it comes to our own, you know, self-care, our own careers and that sort of thing. Like not willing to put in that hustle to make that happen, or maybe just not knowing the benefits. I don't know. I feel like there's a couple different sides to it.
I think you hit it. You said not knowing, and that's really scary. So when I said yes, I was so freaking uncomfortable because I had no idea how I was going to make this money. And there was definitely a doubt in there that I ever would. But I just feel like in my life, I was supposed to be so much more than what I was doing every day. And so when she hit me with you're going to get more of what you've got, I just had to say yes and make everything different. And when it came to like looking at where is this money, I did not want to look at going into debt. I didn't want to take out a line of credit or anything for her. I love those words. For me to pay for her, because that was scary, because then I would be more in debt, which is more of the story that I already had from med school. And there was this huge doubt and fear in me that I couldn't be exactly what it is that I wanted to be. So what I did start to learn was that fear actually showed me I was going in the right direction, because I didn't know what it would look like to do something different and take out a line of credit and then start working on my own self, investing time and money and energy into me and this business that I felt when I was dreaming would work, but when it came into reality was just a dream. And so the not knowing, I think, is what prevents us from moving forward. And one thing that I learned was like making decisions from where I want to be. Would I hire a coach for this price? And heck, yes, I would. So I ended up taking out a loan, which is, people are definitely against doing, but it's an investment. Taking out a loan and paying her in full, which was probably the best thing I ever could have done, but was really freaking scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying to go into debt. Like, I think that, most people have been in some sort of debt at some point. And I feel like it's kind of like this thing that you carry around with you constantly, like as if you're carrying around a backpack full of heavy rocks. It's like, it's always there. You can't get rid of it until it's paid off.
For sure. But if you think about someone who makes, $20,000 a month, because that was my goal when I met her. I thought that's how I can pay all my bills and her bill at the same time, is by making that much money, which seemed, I was a nurse and I was paid rather well, and doctors sometimes don't even make that much money. So it felt like a dream. But if I was in a place where I was making that much money, I could totally afford her. So what is a loan? It's nothing, because I'm going to pay it off as soon, when I start making that money, which is going to happen. So walking through the doubt changed everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like in order to get to that goal of how much money you wanted to make per month, was it very much like shifting your like mental space first and then taking action on the things you wanted to do?
Yeah. So saying yes, I immediately doubled my income, just because I had all my bills as it was, and then I had to pay her. So I started looking for like where I had money, and surprisingly, I had been stuffing money away in little places for quite a while. And I was really avoiding the debt thing. So I started pulling out these little like Canada savings bonds things, which are like little investments. And I had, I put away extra money on the taxes. So I found all these little chunks of money to pay for September and then to pay for the beginning of October. But this pay in full date was coming, and I really wanted to hit it. And I had run out of all of this hidden money. And so I didn't want to keep struggling to pay her and pay my bills. And so I just took the plunge. It was a huge mindset change For sure, because now all of a sudden I used to worry about like signing up for a workshop for $50 or, spending $100 or $500 was like significant. And then all of a sudden we were talking like thousands. So there was a big shift with money. And that took a lot of work too. Like in those months, we were also coaching and looking at how I felt that money was the root of all evil, and that I was supposed to be broke for the rest of my life to be a good yogi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you touch on that? Because that's definitely like, in my private group, in my one-on-one sessions and conversations with friends, I feel like it's just like the biggest complaint that I hear in the yoga industry is like, I'm overworked, I'm underpaid, I don't make enough money, I don't know how to make more money. And I feel like there's money in the yoga industry. Like it's there. People will pay for yoga. Like the proof is in the pudding. Like people do yoga and they feel better and they're willing to pay for that. But how did you kind of shift your mindset from like, I'm a yogi, I should practice non-attachment and not make it about the money, to like, I need to make this money in order to survive / in order to fulfill my dreams and be happy, which is totally a fine mindset to be in.
Mm-hmm. I had a really good coach and we did a lot of work. So, we not only have our own hang-ups, but we also are, we're raised in a culture, a society that has a lot of hang-ups as well. So I know that not only like we are pretty much brainwashed to stay small, right? We have been taught since we were young. Like I just think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On the very bottom, the base that we need is air, water, and food. And then I can't remember if it's the next rung on the pyramid or the rung after that, but one of our base core needs is a stable job. Like that, we've been brainwashed to think that we need to have a pension, that we need to, make minimal amount of money, and that we need to do kind of the broke mentality of trading time for money. And so it was working on these old patterns by looking at, my own history, my own blocks, my family, those kind of things. And then looking societally at all of those things. And then looking at yoga, because yoga talks a lot about renunciation and it talks a lot about unattachment. But when you start to really look into the philosophical part of yoga, there's been major mistranslations on, like one of the things that we're supposed to do is renounce all of our material belongings. And that's actually not true. So what the actual literal translation is that when we are finished with a material possession, we are to pass that on to someone. But what we do, think about buy and sell groups. People are selling their old stuff so that they can make money off of it. Mm-hmm. And that's actually what they're talking about, is that when you have something and you're holding on to it, and the only way that you can let go of it is to receive some energy or money to help you let go of your material possession, well, then that is what's actually the holdback. When you can just outgrow your sweater, let's say because you've either gained weight or you've lost weight, and you're not going to hold on to it until you fit into it again, and someone else that it would look really great on, how awesome is it to just give that sweater to someone that's going to use it, that doesn't have to pay for it. So we have taken like these translations and have made ourselves wrong around them instead of taking them actually literally in basically paying it forward.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I feel like there is a lot of like, I don't know if guilt is the right word, or just maybe kind of like mixed internal feelings like, oh, I should be this way because I teach and practice yoga, but I'm not this way. Like, I like having material possessions. And I always come from it from a place of like, if you like having stuff in your house and that's something that you come home and it makes you feel happy, then I don't really think that there's anything wrong with that. I think material possessions become, an issue when you're buying them to fill a void in your life. And it's getting really clear on how you actually feel about those things, which is kind of a hard thing to delve into because then you have to be really honest with yourself about that sort of thing. But it's definitely interesting to hear that that's more about, passing it on and how the translation's been skewed over time. Because I think people do struggle with that.
And our attachments, when you look around, they're not just physical. So I have two children, and they're teenagers now. One is 17 and one is 15. And if you ask me, they're definitely not living life right. Okay, they're supposed to do so many other things and listen to me. So if I make my whole life about my children and every decision that they make impacts me, then that's being attached. When they leave, which one has, she's moved out, then I'm defined by my children. And when they're not around anymore, or they do something wrong, then I'm wrong and I'm bad. And all of these things. Unattaching is really just like removing your energetic tentacles from those around you, allowing them to live their life exactly as they're supposed to. So as a parent, there's a lot of arguments that can happen here. You can say that you're supposed to guide them, and that's all very correct. So true. You are, so that they don't hopefully die, which doesn't always happen. But when you energetically like detentacle from your child, that means that they're going to screw up, and you just have to like let them. And it means nothing about you as a parent other than you are letting, we have this thing, Eckhart Tolle says, you had your children, but they're not yours.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about. And I mean, we could have a whole conversation around parenting, probably many conversations around it. But I think it's really interesting for me, as an adult, like I'm in my late 20s now, and I feel like there's still, some attachment with my parents. Like they're very attached on what my career looks like and, where I live and how that looks to everyone else in the family. And it's hard as a child to have that sort of pressure on you because then you kind of always feel like, oh, I'm not like living the way that they wanted me to live, but that doesn't really feel fair to me because it's my life. So. And
it's so hard because I'm not perfect. So I just want my children to I want them to be happy. And what does that look like? But when they make decisions, sometimes I'm just like, I'm not happy with it. But
yeah, definitely.
The judgment just doesn't go away, but there is a lot about making sure that we're really good at being like, I'm disappointed in you. And that's being attached. I can't put that on my kids. Like you said, the pressure, even just to live perfectly for your parents, is sometimes too much.
Definitely. And that's just like one element of life. And it's definitely hard. And I mean, I don't have children, so I can't speak from the side of being a parent, but I'm sure it's very, very hard when you're double their age. It's like, I think it's very clear when you can see, a young person and you see like, oh, this is a bad romance, or bad relationship. Like this is only going to end in heartbreak. Like, I don't want you to feel that. Like you should just get out of it now. And then they're like, you're the worst parent ever.
Totally. But you know what? You do have a partner, and we like to make it so conditional, but it's unconditional. It goes all around. If your partner has a friend that's mean to him or a sibling and he still will hang out with that person, you feel that same way. Like, why would you do that? And then you also can put a lot of pressure on him. Like, if he doesn't do what you want him to, then he makes you unhappy. It's the exact same thing. When you unattach, he's living his life, you're living your life, and you're living them together, which means some of the decisions he makes, you're not always going to agree with. And as long as we're firm in our boundaries. So, that's where it comes from, like being a parent or being a partner, that these are the boundaries that I'm not, we can't cross these things. And there are agreements that we make. And then you just have to unattach from the rest, which is pretty hard because we like to put our happiness on other people.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it relates too to even being in like the yoga studio or wherever you teach as a yoga teacher. I feel like it's really easy to kind of get attached on, oh, my students aren't in the pose right. Like that must be on me for cueing it wrong, or, it's my fault because they're not getting it, and that sort of thing, or feeling too attached with whatever they're experiencing in that day, which I think is another place to kind of unattach. Like, of course, it's important to have great cues and to teach a great class, but trust that you're doing that and be honest with yourself if you think you're not, and how you can improve on that instead of putting that kind of on other people.
Totally.
And so do you feel like the money is kind of around attachment as well? Like this idea of like, oh, I shouldn't be making this much money. Like, it's not right in this industry, et cetera, et cetera. Do you feel like that was kind of in attachment for you as well?
For sure. I find that like, it's a good way to make ourselves feel guilty or to play into our story even more, because we want to help, which is why we're yoga teachers. So we go into this industry and be what we've been told, like, oh, renounce and unattach and money's evil and corporate world. Like we're taught so many things that are like brainwashing, and then we've had years and years of like of conditioning on being bad and good. So if what we can start to infer, or what I inferred myself, was that money equals bad, money equals greedy, money equals selfish, money equals like bad, really. And that was not just yoga. That was like years of everything. And what I started to do was unattach from my mindset around money.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I was actually recently having a conversation around money with my business coach, and just talking about, it's like, where does your mindset around money come from? And I kind of clicked with like one thing that I was told as I was growing up is there's three things we don't talk about with other people. It's money, religion, and politics. And, so it's just these topics that like really can get people fired up about things, or can make people feel a certain way. And I've worked pretty hard to have open conversations about religion and politics over the last couple of years, because I think that you can have those conversations without, like hearing both sides of it and being okay that somebody believes something that's different than yourself. And, it's kind of tackling this, like what's different around the conversation with money.
I also had a story that really fed into that. My parents had been really broke when they met, and my mom told me that living in the back of a van with my dad was the best time of her life. And then they, at some point we were on welfare. We were always very broke. And then when we were teenagers, like 16 and 15, my parents started a dump trucking business, and they came into money. The next thing I know, we had like 3 or 4 dump trucks and trailers, and they were always working, and we had drivers, and there was money, and there was food. I remember we had food all the time, which was really great. And my parents, even though they had had a tumultuous relationship, they fell apart when we had money. So for me, I recognized that story was so true, and it had been proven that if I had money and was completely successful and had all my dreams come true, then my whole life would fall apart.
Yeah. That's like so powerful for your career, right? Like if you, one, working in an industry where you feel like, oh, maybe it's a little bit wrong for me to make too much money out of this. And then also being like, well, if I make a lot of money, then, it's just going to be like my parents' relationship, or like, how they ended up with money. And so obviously you worked with a coach to kind of, break through this and break through that story. I'm sure there's people out there listening though, who are like, how did you actually go about, making your goal money and, making significantly more than probably the average person makes within the yoga industry?
hmm So that, I mean, clarity, I've already mentioned, is a big thing. And there's a lot of books. So I read like Think and Grow Rich. So when you're really focused on something, so you stop scattering your thoughts everywhere and you bring it into like laser like concentration, focus. I am going to make $20,000 a month starting, January 2017. um, the thoughts that come to you, you actually have to listen to. And the scary thing is that the thoughts that come to you are the thoughts that really freak you out. So naturally, if I'm spending a lot of time nursing, then I'm going to make more of what I'm already making. I don't have enough time in the day to teach more yoga or come up with more workshops because I'm working a lot. So one of the thoughts was quit nursing. And that's really scary. Like really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was more thoughts like start doing workshops. I had only been teaching up until then, and one of the things that I started doing a pre-registered series for kids yoga. And all of these things really scared me because who am I to be teaching students, concepts? I really love the chakras. And I then started researching them, but I was researching them so that I could teach, which kind of inwardly felt a little bit like fraudulent because who am I to teach this?
Mm-hmm.
But I started doing all those things that freaked me out. And the funny thing is that fear mentality starts to change. All of a sudden, all these things that freak you out aren't that scary anymore, that when you're doing them. And just like paying my coach, when you start to see the success in doing the things you're afraid of, then you start to use your fear as a guide to take you deeper rather than to pull you out. And so all of the actions I took were around fear. Oh, I'm really scared to do a workshop. Okay, I'm going to do it. Oh, I'm really scared to teach kids yoga because who wants to do that? Okay, I'm going to do it. Every decision I made was really specific to my focus.
Yeah. And looking back on those times now, like is any of that stuff kind of scary to you anymore? Is it just like stuff you really enjoy? And what's your mindset around that now?
Yeah, that's so the fear barrier is something like that. Once you break through it, it's not a barrier anymore. So workshops, I mean, I have actually since then stopped teaching students, and now I'm a teacher trainer. So I've run my own teacher trainings. It started small with like meditation teacher training, and now I've started running 200 and then very soon 300-hour teacher trainings. So it's gotten even bigger, after a couple workshops, it was like, well, the teachers are always asking me and they're coming to the student ones. So what I could do is like adapt this so that a teacher can teach it in their class. And so then, I progressed to teaching teachers. And in the beginning that was scary because I'm a junior teacher and senior teachers are who I was looking at helping incorporate these things to. And so that felt fraudulent. Who am I? And they're just going to hate me. And then the funny thing was that that's not what happened. More and more senior teachers were coming to me for advice. And I mean, I started to focus on the business aspect of yoga. And these are teachers that have been teaching for 10 and 15 years full time. And now they're coming to me for advice to teach them how to coach them through the business of yoga. What?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how that kind of all happens. And I mean, it's so amazing that you've been able to break through all those fears. I think it's a good reminder that anything that's scary won't be scary forever. Like I had the same thing when I started my podcast. Like it's like, who am I to start a yoga business podcast? But just one of those things where it's like, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. Like people are either going to listen or they're not going to listen. That's kind of how it's going to work out. Like, and if nobody listens, then I'm going to stop doing it.
So true. Like when you break down the fear, you start to recognize the fear is irrational and there's some story behind it. And I mean, I think like 99.999% of the time that story is I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen. Okay, well then nobody listens. So then I won't do it for very long, but maybe a couple people will listen. And actually I find it rather therapeutic to get my words to a recording that either I can go back on or someone else can, and it might help their business. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's people listening. Whoa. And the fear is irrational. It's
Yeah, definitely. I can actually distinctly remember I was in Savannah, Georgia for Thanksgiving in 2015. And I'd kind of, M.B.O.M had kind of been like growing. But it kind of been like my boyfriend had kind of really encouraged me, like kind of given me that nudge I needed to just go for it. And then it was right around that point that I started working with a coach for the first time as well. And I distinctly remember when he was like, we were in Starbucks and he's like, you're going to message the first person to come on the show. And it was somebody that I like knew well from, my hometown in Canada. And like deep down, I knew she was going to say yes. Like there was no chance that she was going to say no. And I was still so terrified. Like I sent it and then just like put my phone away and like didn't look at it. And then I pulled it out immediately and she'd written back right away. And I was like, holy crap, somebody said yes. Like I have my first guest for my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And now
and then like what was
scary.
The fear? The fear was asking someone, and you were worried that they'd be like, you're doing a podcast? Who are you? Like, you weren't good enough to do it. And then they're like, yeah, great idea. And then all of a sudden the fear was irrational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And now it's funny to look back on that because I was so terrified to reach out to somebody who I knew. And it's like, I've, emailed hundreds of people now being like, hey, do you want to come on the show? Most people say yes. There are people who say no though. And it's, it sucks when somebody says no, but it's really not that big a deal because there's lots of cool people who say yes. So
totally.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. And so can you talk a little bit about what the transition's been like from, teaching entirely students to teaching more teachers and even, offering coaching yourself as well?
Yeah, the transition was gradual, but I can nail it down. So I had done a meditation teacher training, and I think my meditation teacher was excited for me, but also maybe kind of like not, because who am I? I'm a junior, she's a senior. But it was successful. And so it kind of gave me a little bit more courage to keep going. And I had signed up for Tony Robbins Business Mastery in Vegas in August. So a year after I started working with my coach. And I don't know how it happened. Well, I kind of know how it happened, but I ended up being the very first person that Tony spoke to out of a crowd of like 2,900 people or 5,000. I can't even remember what the number is. And that was crazy. So I got up and it was a question about like, how's business? What business are you in? And what business are you in? How is business? And I said, I'm a yoga teacher and, business is pretty good. So it was, and he's like, what does that mean? And then you go a little deeper. And he said, I don't want to offend you, but I want to tell you that yoga teachers are a dime a dozen. And I had actually heard right before I went to the Business Mastery that there are currently more yoga teachers in the world right now than there are yoga students.
Wow.
And so I was just like, yes, I get that. And he said, so how can you stand out from every other yoga teacher? And the funny thing is that when you stand up in a crowd that big, you kind of become like a mini celebrity because you're up on these cameras and everybody sees you. And then, there's all these people. I don't know how many yoga teachers I talked to that attended this Business Mastery, which was surprising to me in itself. But when it just blurted out in that moment that I need to teach teachers. Mm-hmm. And then we talked a little bit more about that. And he's like, yep, you're right. Like, here you go, go do this. And then I sat down and I thought, oh shit, oops, hopefully I can swear. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. And I thought, oh no, like I'm wrong. I need to talk to him again. I need to put my hand up and take that all back and I'll do something else. I'll do retreats or something, which I was already doing. It was the fear. And it took me a while to catch on to that. That fear was actually, my old pattern showing up to tell me to keep going. But I then came back and immediately signed on with which actually my own teacher at that studio parallel that I went to and took my training through, I co-taught this 200-hour with her. And in it, it was just like that same feeling that I had when she said, you need to do this, right? It was like a defining moment of this is what I have to do. Well, when I had done the meditation teacher training, and then I was sitting doing this 200-hour, it was another moment of like, this is what I have to do. I didn't make a mistake. I am a teacher, and I love this. Like, I have talked to so many people. One of my teachers was telling me that, she has spent every weekend working, teaching teacher trainings, and she's exhausted and her family misses her. And, she's burnt out. And in this moment, I'm not, because my experiences, it didn't feel like I was working at all. It felt like I was sitting with a bunch of like-minded people and passing on some awesome wisdom and then getting so many lessons from them. It was defining, this is what I have to do. So from there, I decided if this is what I'm going to do, then again, like nursing was kind of holding me back. So are all these yoga classes that I'm teaching at whatever, $30 to $60 a class. They're holding me back because this is what I'm spending a bunch of my time doing. So I let go of the kids. I started training people so that they could take it over. I let go of all of the pre-registered meditation courses I was doing. Like, I started to let go of all of it and solely focus on teaching teachers and coaching teachers in their business.
That's amazing. What a journey. It sounds like you've gotten really good at kind of trusting your gut and trusting your intuition and just going in that direction.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I've said this lately that like I've taught things a certain way for so long, and I've said these words like the more you listen to your intuition, the stronger your intuition gets. Talked about how people can meditate, and in the last little while, it's like I have been correct in the way I've been teaching it, but I have now understood it on a deeper level, just like an onion. A layer has been peeled away. And there's like this whole new landscape now of your intuition really does get stronger the more you listen to it. And the fear really does get less. And you start to see how irrational things are because you start to see your successes in doing that very thing that you were so scared of. But also, if it doesn't go the way you want to, I don't see that as bad. I'm like, there's something here for me. And so even if it doesn't go the way I wanted it to, I come out with this great knowledge that helps to propel me forward. So I think some people may look at that as a failure. And I used to for sure, but now I just see it as like another part of the journey that's like gets me to my successes.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, it's interesting. I want to tie this back to the money because I'm sure there's somebody out there listening being like, okay, so you put the money in the coach, you invested that, then you started making it, and then you broke down the fears, and that's, kind of all linked to that. I want to tie it back together. So it's like the coaching, investing in yourself, spending all this money that you didn't have really kind of lit this fire to do these things that you wanted to do. I guess, so one question on that journey is, did you ever have any points where you were like, this is too much, like I'm just going to give up?
Yeah, there was. So for me, I felt like the stop would be money. But what I recognized was I went away on a family vacation. So I love Ram Dass says that, if you think you're enlightened, take a week away with your family. I did it. I went away and I set up a boundary. So I've always been like a take care of everybody, yes, yes, yes person. And I couldn't do it anymore. So I actually said no. And it was rather interesting. That boundary, what it did in the family was kind of set a big upset. There was a lot of drama in that moment, and old patterns reemerged, and everybody kind of did their role in that. And I actually just picked up my family and we left. And so I'm driving down the road, and I already mentioned I'm not much of a crier. I was bawling. It was like 10 or 11 at night. We've left this family vacation, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and my family does not know what to do with me because they feel really bad. But they're going to stand up and tell me how terrible everybody else is. And I had a moment of like, oh, this I think is where I want to stop, because I feel so terrible setting boundaries and disappointing people that I don't think like I can keep doing this. Mm-hmm. And then it was a moment, and, I finished my crying and I kept driving, and it was like a bump in the road. There was so much lesson there. I came home. I talked to my coach. It was very objective, clinical, kind of like I like things, so that I could get back on track and keep going, because I decided I'm not going to stop. But it wasn't money, which I thought it would be. It was actually like setting boundaries and being firm and disappointing people, because I know that I had really upset my sister, and, my brother didn't take my side, and all of these crazy kind of things. But I kept going, and everything's okay. We're all good, and the boundaries are respected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, family in particular is a hard one, especially if you're trying to make a big change in your life. And it's something that my boyfriend and I talk about quite a bit on our travel podcast, because, having this space while traveling was where we were really able to make some big changes in our lives, because, we were quite young at that point, and it's really hard to stand up for yourself. Like, it takes a lot of, I guess, like, balls, you could say, to stand up to like the people who have known you since you were little, maybe your entire life, who know you to be a certain way, and tell them, I'm not going to be this person anymore, and you need to respect that.
Totally. And then they blame, like, oh, what are you into? I hear that a lot. What are you into? Drinking the Kool-Aid. And I'm like, now I'm just like, I love the Kool-Aid, so I'm going to keep drinking it. So blame that if you want. But literally, I'm loving myself. And that's something I've never done. And I'm saying no right now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you brought that up, because that was my dad's exact reaction. Like, you're quitting your job to like teach yoga and work at Lululemon, and sorry, what is Ryan doing? Ryan's my partner. He's like, I'm going to be a barista and a chef for a while, and maybe serve along the way, just like get some life experience. They're like, sorry, you're in your mid-20s doing what? And he's like, what, like, are you like on drugs? Like, do you have an addiction to, like, do we need to talk about this? I'm like, dude, chill out. I'm just making a change in my life. It's fine.
Yeah, it's hard. It's more fearful, like, because then, it's like, when you let the light shine in you, you encourage others to let the light shine in them. Mm-hmm. So that means there's a moment when you're stepping into the fullness of who you are, in which the people around you then examine themselves. And so it's much easier to be like, oh, you're drinking the Kool-Aid than to like look inside and maybe take a drink of the Kool-Aid yourself and start to let the light shine in you. Because that's scary. And we're not used to living, in fear that way. We're used to living in fear of debt and fear of, actually making your dreams happen. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's way easier to blame than to say, oh, she's actually doing what she wants, and she doesn't care if she doesn't have a home in Alberta.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, definitely. Pretty much nailed that one.
Yeah. Which Amazing. You're supposed to. You're supposed to have a home and a car and a husband and, 2.2 kids, maybe 3 now. I think 3 is kind of cool again. Yeah. That's what you're supposed to do, not be a yoga teacher living in Mexico City. That's insane.
Yeah. No, exactly. Amazing. Is there anything else that you want to share about, anything you've learned along your journey, just in general, like your journey as a yoga teacher?
Yeah, I think, and it comes back more to self-love. A lot of what I've learned lately is around compassion and love for myself. So I'm really quick to jump on myself in everything that I'm doing. If I don't hit 20 grand, I'm bad. where I have now learned that I'm perfect. I'm just incomplete. And that's the story of myself and the story I see in everyone else. Everyone is perfect. Everything that's happening is perfect. It's just incomplete, which means there's more to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
And so if people are interested in checking out what you do, the different offerings that you have, where can they go to find you?
Yes, thank you. So, one thing that can really help most business people is that if you pick a name, make it easy to spell, because my business is called Friction, but it is the phonetic spelling. So it's actually FRIK-SHUHN. And so I'm Friction Yoga and Coaching on Facebook, Friction Yoga on Instagram, and friction.com on the interwebs.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on here, Amanda.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast. I had such a great time recording it with Colynn, and I just learned so much from this conversation, and it just made me think about so much within my own life. So hopefully you've got a lot of different value bombs, you could say, out of this episode. And if you're looking for a business coach, you can book a call with myself. You can book a call with Colynn. You can post in the private Facebook group, trying to find somebody who's a good fit for you. And that's Yoga Business Badasses. As always, you can find show notes at mbomyoga.com. You can find me on social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And a quick thank you to our sponsor for the show, Fave Yogis. Make sure you go and check them out and use code M.B.O.M. when you sign up. And just a quick reminder to go check out Yoga Business Bootcamp. If you're not interested in the full versions of the courses, then, go check out the podcast. It's on iTunes. There's a link in the show notes. You can go find all of that and watch the videos and all of that good stuff. As always, thank you so much for listening, and namaste.